专题。接下来呢，是我们专题讨论的时间。We are going to focus on whole of society defense resilience。当然，我们要聚焦的主题呢，就是全社会防御韧性。And now let me bring to you your moderator and 3 panel speakers to the stage。接下来呢，我们要邀请我们的主持人以及3位语坛贵宾到台上来就座。Let's firstly welcome your moderator.Thompson Zhou, President of Taiwan Foreign Correspondents Club and Staff Correspondent for Nikkei Asia. 让我们掌声欢迎台湾外国记者会理事长暨日经亚洲资深记者。And joining us for the panel, let's firstly welcome Keynote, Head of European Economic and Trade Office in Taiwan. 掌声欢迎我们的语坛贵宾，首先是欧洲经贸办事处古立哲处长。Karen Lund, Acting Director of American Institute in Taiwan, 美国在台协会梁凯文代理处长 and Ruth Bradley Jones, Representative British Office Taipei, 以及英国在台办事处包琼玉代表，有请。All right, and over to your moderator, Thompson.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I hope everyone had a lovely lunch and lots of coffee to power through the afternoon. It's a pleasure to be part of this very important discussion today. This morning we heard from experts and President Lai, who spoke about Taiwan's efforts to step up resilience and preparedness in a wide range of areas, as well as a newly updated security handbook released by the National Defense Ministry. This panel invites 3 distinguished speakers from the international community to share their views and insights on Taiwan's progress and what Taiwan can do more. So on my immediate right is Gunnar, Head of the European Economic and Trade Office in Taiwan. Seated in the middle is Karen M. Lang, Acting Director of the American Institute in Taiwan. And last but not least, we'll be joined by Ruth Bradley Jones, British representative of the British Office Taipei. So perhaps I'll first turn to Karen. Karen, this morning we heard from President Lai. He highlighted a number of programs to strengthen resilience of the population, ranging from tabletop exercises, drills on the ground, critical supply distribution, to the use of drones, and increasing defense spending, etc., etc. How do you assess Taiwan's progress in terms of building resilience?
Is it on? Yes. Okay. Well, first, I just want to extend my thanks to you, Thompson, for moderating this panel, and to the Office of the President and to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the invitation to be on this panel. It is my pleasure, and to my fellow panelists, Lutz and Ruth, as well. Obviously, this is a very big day as we celebrate really the milestone of the first anniversary of the establishment of the Whole of Society Defense and Resilience Committee. And this committee reflects the President's vision and commitment, and really the whole leadership of Taiwan's vision and commitment to increasing whole of society resilience. So it really is a milestone to celebrate, and I congratulate the work of all the committee members. This week is also, of course, the week that we commemorate the 1999 earthquake, and many of us had the opportunity yesterday to travel with the President to Yilan County to see the demonstration of some of the exercises that have been going on around the country. It's my first time seeing that, but by all accounts, it was really the most comprehensive exercise to date. So that is also really a milestone that Taiwan deserves a lot of credit for. On the committee, I think that the committee has really succeeded by bringing together leaders from diverse fields and creating a platform for problem solving that really has extended the scope and the impact of Resilience Initiative. And the key is really this multi-stakeholder approach, uniting researchers, civil society organizations, and of course all levels of government which have enhanced not only Taiwan's ability to respond to immediate crises, but to really lay the groundwork for enhanced resilience in the long term. We would cite as particular examples of success the work on urban resilience exercises, which have really improved public awareness and communication, and also the efforts to combat malign interference in the information space as successes of the committee. The United States will continue to work with Taiwan across the whole range of resilience areas, from cybersecurity to energy security to communication and health. Of course, as we look ahead, we have to acknowledge that this kind of work is never done. Future progress is going to require increased resources. It's going to require greater public participation and greater expertise involved in the effort. It will require even greater coordination across all Taiwan's ministries, and then also vertically from the city government, the county government, to the national government level. And then looking outside Taiwan, we look toward Taiwan increasing its regional and global partnerships, especially with countries that have expertise in particular areas of resilience. All of that will increase Taiwan's capabilities. So there's a lot of work to be done. With that, I yield to my next panelist.
Thank you, Karen. I think now we'll turn to Lutz. Lutz, look, I mean, resilience is a key issue for Europe these days, but particularly since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, full invasion of Ukraine a few years back. From your perspective, how well is Taiwan in terms of strengthening preparedness? We're looking at a range of areas such as coordination, communication, implementation of policies, etc.
Thank you very much, Thompson, and I would like to echo the thanks of Karen, to the Office of the President, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and for setting up this very, very important discussion. We are not here to give any marks, but it's, I think, quite interesting to look at parallels and from things that we can learn from each other in these things. And you mentioned it, also from a European perspective, we had an eye-opening moment that did not only start with Russia's invasion in Ukraine, but has, of course, already some predecessors, not least the COVID pandemic, etc., where we found out actually that we were not so well prepared on many things. And that is the first point that I want to make also in answering your question is, this is not only about resilience, this is also about preparedness. Because preparedness is a little bit larger than resilience. It includes prevention, it includes a certain foresight, it includes the resilience part, really to withstand, and of course adaptation as well. And I think the mere fact that the committee has been set up is, I think, exactly the right way to bring together different parts of society. And I would also stress in particular, because it has not yet mentioned, the economic side of things, industry, industrial actors, business actors, etc., because they are a very important part in there. So I think this idea of an all-hazard approach, which is not just about security, which is broader, as we discussed already this morning, and as the President also put out, this all of society, and I think third concept, all of government approach. These are the three key things that need to be combined. And I think a very good basis has been created with this committee. More concretely, what I particularly see as a very impressive development, I think, is the very distinct cross-agency effort that I see to reach out, to look for concepts from partners, experience from partners, and translate them back into the specific situation on the ground here in Taiwan. I think we have a number of very good examples for this. This doesn't mean that you need to copy, but I think their committee, the different actors, and some examples were made this morning, kind of showed really interesting and very positive developments. You also asked about the communication about this, and I think this is really key. We are in a similar situation that we need to explain as public institutions, policymakers, etc. Why is this important? And it cannot be just a top-down communication. It needs to become a societal imperative that is really, let's say, taken on by each and every individual. And we had a very interesting debate this morning in one of the panels where the question came, can this be done on the basis of fear, for example? And I think there was an absolute unanimity. This cannot be by fear. This needs to be a sense of belongingness, of duty. And I think this is also the big challenge, but also I think where a lot groundwork has been laid, that this needs to be an inclusive exercise, that this is not just about one of the of the resilience issues, that this is cross-cutting, but really concerning everybody. I stop here.
Thank you, Lutz. I think you made very important points about both preparedness, which involves a broader range of issues beyond the traditional areas of security, as well as the importance of communications in all forms. We would now like to turn to Ruth, last but not least. Ruth, how do you evaluate Taiwan's progress and efforts in stepping up resilience and preparedness?
Thanks, Thompson. As the third panelist in the first question, immediately after lunch, I'm going to do two things. The first is, can everyone raise their hands just to make sure you're not asleep? Brilliant. Thank you. And the second is to keep my answers short, this answer anyway, short. So I've got 3 quick points. 1, I think crisis response is really deeply ingrained in Taiwan. 所以我对台湾的危机应对能力有信心。The second is, I am really, I've only been here 7 months in this job, but I am so impressed about how rapidly the Taiwan government has ramped up your efforts across society, across government, across industry, given the changing threats you're facing. And I think, as Karen pointed out, the urban exercises in July were a really excellent example of this. And I know there's even bigger effort planned in terms of integrating that next year. The third point is crisis prep is always patchy and never finished, but you have to keep doing it. And so if there was one thing that I would like to point out as a priority, just from my personal observation and from the sort of stories I've heard, it would be really to focus on that moment where you shift from normal time, civilian structures, into crisis response, hybrid structures, and that feels like a priority at the moment. But to conclude, to paraphrase badly Confucius, or maybe not Confucius, we'll never know, it doesn't matter what speed you work at, just don't stop.
Thank you, Ruth, on that philosophical take from Confucius, reportedly. I want to sort of move on. All 3 of you have mentioned how you evaluated and observed Taiwan's progress so far. And perhaps we can start with Lutz on the second question on what are some of the best practices that the EU can potentially offer Taiwan to learn from in terms of the whole range of preparedness issues that you mentioned?
Again, this is not a beauty contest. This is a very practical kind of exercise where we need to look at where we can work together, learn from each other, etc. And this is also the spirit of the few things that I would like to mention. I think the first one, which I mentioned it beforehand already, we just put in place, actually literally a couple of weeks ago, a new strategy. We called it the Union Preparedness Strategy, which makes exactly this important point that you cannot look at things in silos and stovepipes. You need to look at the 6 key areas always together if you want to achieve a very effective way. And these are related to the economy, they are related to climate issues, they're related to health, they're related to digital, they're related to security, and last but not least also society and democracy, because all these things are interplaying. And the moment you forget one of them, you might be weaker on the one or the other. And I think this partly very holistic approach, but also on the other hand, complete approach is something that we believe is a good way to move forward. And as a matter of fact, with many of the members of the committee, I've exchanged a lot, and I see there is a very similar thinking. So that would be the first one. The second one is, even if it is already a couple of years ago that the so-called Cold War was happening and our preparedness was much in a different state, but still there is a lot of structures, laws, practices, etc., that many European member states still have either in place and just paused or actually still active. So there is a lot of experience in this field. And be just kind of how you warn your population, very practical things. And the point that I want to make is that what we have and what we are actually reactivating is to reevaluate, to look a little bit critical, what can we take up again? What was best practice of the past? And have actually quite a good puzzle of issues already together, which could be also an inspiration, for the debate here in Taiwan. And I'm explicitly also talking about things that are built by law, for example. Stockpiling requirements, protection of critical infrastructure, etc. The list is very long. I will not go through all of them. But I think this legal, or what exists already legally speaking, and what kind of certain recommendations is the second. The third one, we talked in one of the panels this morning, is the volunteering culture. I think volunteering work is very, very important and goes across many of those areas. We talked about Zhu Ji Foundation this morning. I want to give you the example of the fire brigades in Austria, for example. It's not a very big EU country, 9 million inhabitants. There are 250,000 volunteer fire brigade, men and women. And even if you add the youth, etc., this is really the backbone of this part, of this part to protect the society, at least now as far as fire is concerned. And it's a very important signal that these things are a pillar, of the structure. And not to make it too long, I would like to speak about the last point, which is very dear to my heart, and many people will smile if I say this. This is also about our democracy. It's about interference in our public debate. It is about information manipulation, the risk. I think we really need to have this very, very clearly also in our focus. We have made quite significant investment in this area. I think also have a good way forward in this area. I would just mention this also as one of the many, many different building blocks that we could engage, or where also Taiwan could be inspired.
Thank you, Lutz. I think you mentioned it's a very inspiring example of the Austrian fire brigade. It sort of almost feels like a big society approach to dealing with some of the issues that society faces. I now want to invite perhaps Ruth to share some of Britain's lessons. Being in Taiwan, we see that Britain's businesses are resilient and robust at home and abroad, and so are Taiwanese enterprises. So could you perhaps weigh in on some of the lessons, for example, working with the private sector or other issues?
Yeah, thank you, Thompson. Lutz gave lots of really excellent examples, and I'm going to just give one example. That doesn't mean that we only have one example. I'm just focusing on one. I also want to flag that I think this role modeling and learning is two-way. So, for example, the UK in the summer, I think, early summer, released our international defence strategy, where we talk for the first time repeatedly about whole of society resilience. So we are definitely stealing from you too. What I want to focus on is what we call in the UK public-private partnership. And it's not just because you can neatly alliterate it to a very satisfying PPP. It's also because it is actually a really, really important part of our emergency response, really recognising the complementary skills of business, and of government, so that you have the national scale framework and direction, whilst drawing on much more agile logistics, supply chains, service excellence, for example. Now, I know this is already in Taiwan thinking. I know, for example, Family Mart was talking just earlier next door. I know, for example, in Hualien earthquake or in the typhoons earlier this year, you drew on, international companies too. So Eutelsat OneWeb, which is a UK, European-owned company, was part of your telecoms resilience plan. So all of that is happening. But the key point that I think the UK is actually really strong on is that we don't just bring in individual companies for the crisis. The concept of PPP is really baked into our crisis planning approach. And so really making sure that that conceptual arrangement with industry and how you make that work, whether it's, and being sort of contracting up front, whether it's kind of actually legally binding contract or whether it's a sense of collaboration, being very clear and specific in your approach right through the whole life cycle of your crisis response planning. So don't forget, PPP.
Thank you, Ruth. I think you made a very valid remark at the start, particularly about how learning could be a two-way street, that Taiwan learns from partnering countries and others also learn from Taiwan. Perhaps we can now invite Karen to perhaps share. There's a lot of focus on U.S.-Taiwan relations these days. So perhaps what are some of the best practices that America has that Taiwan could look at and learn from?
Thank you so much. Well, first, I would just absolutely echo everything that Ruth said. In fact, my remarks are geared around the concept of the public-private partnerships. And Taiwan deserves a lot of credit for leveraging its very robust private sector to ensure whole-of-society resilience. Businesses just offer so much to this planning process and, of course, in a crisis. So cannot strongly emphasize enough the importance of those public-private partnerships. I do have 5 thoughts. They're short, so don't worry. 5 quick thoughts on some success and lessons learned from the United States in this regard. First, anchor these partnerships in a national strategy, in a coherent strategy, so that everyone has a very clear sense of the same mission and that they understand the overall mission. We have a national resilience strategy currently being updated, and then we are for the first time in the process of finalizing a national risk register, which I think the UK has, which is a really good way to focus all these different actors, state, local, federal, private, civil society, so that everyone has a common frame of reference. Second, leverage the existing channels. We don't need to go creating new networks necessarily when there are so many existing networks, organizations. Just looking here in Taiwan, for example, the American Chamber of Commerce, like other international organizations or trade associations, industry associations, those are natural and excellent partners who already have very developed resources, very developed relationships, very developed networks that they can plug in. Third, clarify roles and decision rules well in advance of a crisis. This is hard work that requires, whether it's a working group or a steering committee or multiple of those, but really make sure that before crisis, how decisions are made and where the authority lies for which decision is very clear, particularly if lines get crossed, there are disputes or things don't go as planned. And then we would also say the next one would be to shift from sort of an all hazards approach to a risk-informed approach. Using tools such as a national risk register, you can identify the greatest threats and vulnerabilities, which allows all the actors involved to really focus their efforts and their resources on the greatest risk. And then finally, I know we all know this, but it never hurts to emphasize to just build in those redundancies in communication and information flow, especially around cyber risks or supply chains. And as part of this, it's really incumbent upon federal levels or state levels to make sure that there is technical assistance available, particularly for those small and medium-sized enterprises who want to participate but who would need technical assistance to be able to make sure that they're plugged into these information channels. And part of the information is providing data, making data accessible so that your private partners can make informed risk assessments and choices. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I think a related issue that I want to ask now, apart from we talked about communications, private sector, another key issue in the whole discussion going on here regarding emergency response and preparedness is the role of local governments. Now, some of you have touched upon this earlier, but I want to emphasize this is so relevant to the challenges Taiwan faces, whether it's natural disasters or conflicts, that the local government, municipal authorities have a key role to play in getting the population ready. So perhaps we can turn to Ruth first. What does successful cooperation between the central government in the UK and local authorities look like? And what can Taiwan learn from?
Okay, I'm going to talk about three things: our Amber Book, COBRA, and strategic communications. So first of all, the UK approach to how we coordinate at all levels is set out in our Amber Book. 就想说的是，根本无法与小红书相比。I also want to say it is nothing like this Amber Book, which is really focused. Yeah, 不好意思，有点慢。Right. It's also not anything like this book, which is very much focused on advice to the public. Our Amber Book is, in fact, a book that sets out our conceptual, operational approach to emergency response. And so, as I see it, there are four key elements to how we do it. The first is that clarity of roles and coordination structure is vital. You really need a very well-known structure that you can then flex into different emergency response approaches. The second is that this is rooted in a principle of subsidiarity, and that means that we always manage the crisis at the lowest appropriate level. The third element is that we take a whole-of-life crisis approach. Whole-of-life crisis response approach. So that means the pre-crisis, horizon scanning, preparation, and the post-crisis lesson learning are genuinely as important as the response to acute crisis phase. And then finally, and I think Karen mentioned this in her earlier answer, that really having accessible, real-time, usable data is very, very important. So having a good data platform is important. And we have something called Resilience Direct, which sounds great. I'm sure that it's not quite as direct as it sounds, though. But that is the goal. So that's our little Amber Book. Second, COBRA. So this stands for Cabinet Office Briefing Room. It is our nerve centre for handling major crises. And when we stand up a COBRA, it does three things. It signals very clearly to everyone it is a crisis, and that puts everyone into crisis response mode. Secondly, it signals that this is something that the centre is going to take charge of, and everyone else, be that civil, be that government, be that social organisations, be that military, they all dock into that leadership and coordination mechanism. And thirdly, it practically stands up a very clear and very well-drilled structure of like gold, silver, bronze. Gold being the strategic level response, silver being the tactical, bronze being the operational and frontline. And everyone knows that drill. And a couple of examples of where we've used that well are, for example, the Manchester Arena bombings in 2017 and COVID response in 2020-21. And finally, strategic communications. We put a big emphasis on this and actually believe we're pretty good at it. And we provide advice on strategic comms and actually on COBRA around the world. And we think StratComms is key to maintaining public trust, credibility, control of narrative, all while supporting that operational response piece. So I do think that is really, really relevant here. So when you think of UK crisis response, just think COBRA, StratComms, COBRA, StratComms, COBRA, StratComms.
Thank you, Ruth. I think your point, it touches upon what others have talked about on the importance of communications. That I think it's interesting you mentioned the need to have in control of the narrative and public trust. I think in conversations among Taiwanese officials when it comes to dealing with fake news and all forms of coercion, the information space plays a very large part. And perhaps now we can, I want to turn to Karen. Karen, what does coordination in terms of local, federal level look like in the US, and what are the perhaps important steps for Taiwan to look at?
Thank you so much. Of course, every situation is different. In the U.S., we really are under our federal system of government. Our states have very, very significant authorities and responsibilities in this area for crisis preparedness and response. Of course, the United States has a population that's much, much larger than Taiwan's, and we're much more geographically spread out with 50 state governments. So it won't be the exact same model that Taiwan should follow. But in the United States, our system is based on a couple of key principles. And one of them is really the empowerment of state and local governments to take the primary role in managing preparedness and resilience activities with appropriate federal support. And many U.S. states have very, very advanced crisis preparedness departments, and actually, of course, have collaborated with Taiwan extensively and will continue to collaborate with Taiwan extensively, and have a very robust infrastructure at the state level. Now, for Taiwan, which is much smaller, that model may not translate exactly. The other thing that is a real hallmark of the U.S. effort, not perfect, but what we strive for is a really streamlined federal role and accountability. The National Resilience Strategy is an important tool for us to really consolidate and make sure we don't have overlapping areas of authority, and make sure that our policies, whether it's the state level or the federal level, are very well coordinated. And I think that is certainly something that Taiwan can learn from, and that stakeholders, so that the stakeholders really understand what they are responsible for and who else is responsible for different pieces of the response. And any kind of successful policy must include very robust stakeholder feedback mechanisms, and must improve accountability by making it easier to track outcomes, inform budgets, and measure success. This is the data piece that we have all mentioned, that data is just so important. In Taiwan, obviously, city and county governments, they represent an essential link in the resilience chain. They are the ones providing services to the population, identifying the needs, delivering those services, and communicating effectively up to the central government, and then also from the central government down to the population. So it's not exactly the same model as the United States, but certainly the role of the local government and county government cannot be overstated. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I think you mentioned several important themes, particularly accountability, information, avoiding overlaps between different levels and layers of government. So now I'll invite Lutz to also weigh in are there any examples, experiences from the EU, from the European Union in this regard?
Well, since you asked the level in a nation state, maybe I'm not the best place to really answer it because I'm not representing a nation state, and my colleagues here, at least from 5 EU member states, can give you a lot of examples. But let me nevertheless speak about our EU mechanism, because there is a very simple idea behind, or two ideas. The first one is what Ruth mentioned, and it felt as if you're back in the EU, subsidiarity, which is really the key element in all this. So let's make the smaller entity deal with the problems that are most adapted, because they know most likely best. And talking about your first question, I think this is in particular for natural disasters in Taiwan. I've been very, very impressed with your local crisis reaction and disaster response centers, really very, very, very impressive. The second one is a question of solidarity and allocation of assets and resources. And this is where, for example, the EU mechanism is so important, because sometimes disasters strike in different places at the same time. I give you a very, very tangible example. We have, in particular, with climate change ongoing and with heat and also dry summers kind of increasing, have more and more problems with forest fires in particular. And sometimes some of our, in particular, southern EU member states are hit by the same time, and that poses a big, big problem, because there are not endless planes available and not endless kind of capabilities. And just to have this mechanism where you can call on, to get the assets that you need, where it's coordinated, also in a transparent and also understandable manner, I think is one of these elements that we mentioned. And last thing, I think what we all three here really, really underlined is, in all this, communication is key. And I think that's the part, not only because of disinformation, but also which channel to use in what time, is really a crucial thing, where in particular we, as representing here more the governmental or kind of authority side, where we really need to learn, where do we need to engage with our populations in times of crisis and need, and how do we keep that information flowing?
Thank you. There's lots of ideas, suggestions, and observations regarding resilience and best practices. I think these are all very timely, as the Whole of Society Defense Resilience Committee marks its 1-year anniversary soon. So happy birthday to the committee. And on that cheerful note, please give a round of applause to our panelists today, Lutz, Karen, and Ruth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I invite the moderator and 3 panel speakers to stand up, and let's have a photo in the middle of the stage. Thank you to Thompson, thank you to Lutz, thank you to Karen, thank you to Ruth. Thank you once again. And if we want to end this session in the words of Confucius, we can say it's a joy to have friends coming from afar. And what's even more is that they're giving us such a wonderful discussion. Everybody give them a big round of applause. Please look at the cameras in front of you. 再次谢谢我们台上的4位主讲人带来这么精彩的讨论，谢谢。